Hi, my name is Aaron Pele and I'm here to talk about Bhutan's role in climate change. Bhutan, also known as the Kingdom of Bhutan, is a South Asian country located to the east of the Himalayas and bordering with the south of China and the north of India. Bhutan has been labelled a least developed country by the United Nations, which means it is least developed in terms of national gross income and economic vulnerability. Much of Bhutan's politics and philosophy has been closely based around the idea of gross national happiness, an idea which itself is closely tied with the country's long Buddhist history. Gross national happiness is built on four pillars of ideas: economic growth and development, preservation and promotion of cultural heritage, preservation and sustainable use of the environment, and good governance. Buddhism advocates humans to be in harmony with the natural environment, and its position on climate change is one of self-preservation. Bhutan has not been accountable for the global emission causing climate change. On the contrary, the nation has been lauded by the head of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change as a country to aspire to be like, considering its continuing goals of fighting climate change and providing a happy, safe environment for its citizens. The country creates a very small amount of pollution and next to zero greenhouse gas emissions. This is achieved by a significant portion of the population using electric cars and minimal pollution, as well as a self-awareness of conservation, forest preservation, and striving towards the gross national happiness goal. Despite the country's lack of contribution to the problems of climate change, Bhutan has felt the effects of it, including endangered species, the emergence of subtropical diseases, erosion, cyclones, and increased industrialisation. The latter has especially been cited as an obstacle to the gross national happiness, which is essentially the basis of the Bhutan's government and its guiding philosophy. However, the biggest effect of climate change on Bhutan is the floods caused by the receding glaciers. The Himalayas boast the largest region of glaciers outside the polar region, and statistics have shown that they have rapidly retreated in the last few decades. In addition to flash floods, these circumstances have had effects on the water supply, the agriculture, biodiversity, and more, and have had a direct impact on the large portion of Bhutan's population. The country will inevitably have to adapt rather than to mitigate to the effects of climate change. And now over to Claudia for more information on the effects climate change has had on Bhutan.
The consequences of climate change raise critical questions for the Kingdom of Bhutan. Bhutan contains 1,317 square kilometres of Himalayan glacial landforms, comprising of 667 glaciers and 2,674 glacial lakes. Studies conducted by Medha Bisht, Assistant Professor of International Relations at the University of South Asia, revealed that 25 glaciers have already been declared potentially dangerous. This number is bound to rise as climate change worsens. Glacial melt caused by a change in climate would unleash an ecological disaster, with over 70% of settlements being located in lake drainage basins. Bisht's studies illustrate how the effects of climate change have had and will continue to have a serious impact upon the agricultural biodiversity of our land. Loss of medicinal plants, a change in species composition, and a risk of forest fires becoming more frequent, losing valuable forest resources as a result, are amongst some of the issues we face. The structure and functioning of our alpine meadows is set to be disrupted, causing an alteration in the habitat of many ecologically sensitive and economically important species. Furthermore, there is a risk of further damage occurring to wetlands and to the freshwater ecosystems of lakes, marshes, and rivers. A change in precipitation patterns and an increase in temperature as a result of global warming would bring low yields of agricultural harvests, causing a rise in issues regarding food security. The number of pest and disease-related incidences would be heightened, and the extinction of some species, varieties, and breeds would become imminent. All facets of life in Bhutan, which we hold so dear, our national happiness, well-being, and prosperity, would come under threat as a result of climate change. Since 2008, Bhutan has been a constitutional monarchy with a multi-party democratic system of parliament. Bhutan's government operates with a separation of powers, with the parliamentary, executive, and judicial branches working in defined areas of responsibility. Our Chief of State, King Jigme Wangchuck, embodies and represents the nation, whilst the government, composing predominantly of elected members of parliament, including the Prime Minister Shering Tobgay, the National Council and National Assembly exercise legislative power. King Wangchuck holds ceded power in regards to this legislation. The notion that one has to bear the karma of one's actions is deeply rooted in the Bhutanese psyche. The central ethos of Bhutan's culture is quintessentially Buddhist, and this resonates even within our parliament. Dashoi Miraj Gurung of the Bhutan Post suggests that the doctrine of karma, which we follow so closely in Bhutan, inherently links accountability with good governance. The administrative accountability held by our government was introduced and correspondingly enforced in the 60s with the development of our country's first 5-year plan, and still reigns proudly today. Although our citizens possess the freedom to question and debate on the actions of Parliament, our most recent election held in 2013 saw a significant decrease of 14% in voter participation since 2008, the year our constitution was introduced. Bhutanese voters are currently not fully aware of their civic education, democratic process, and their roles and responsibilities. To ensure a vibrant democracy, our nation has partnered with the United Nations Development Programme to enforce the Civic Engagement and Accountability Project, as a means to promote participation and raise awareness in regards to the proceedings of Parliament. In regards to climate change, this project shall seek to educate our citizens and raise awareness on the dangers our nation is currently facing as a result of the epidemic of climate change.
While industries and technologies that largely contribute to global warming are flourishing, adding to the several billion tonnes of CO2 currently in the Earth's atmosphere, solutions for a greener environment are being administered. According to Scientific American, change has begun and is accelerating. The most obvious solution to climate change is the reduction of CO2 in the atmosphere. The main method to achieve this is to reduce the excavation and burning of fossil fuels such as coal, oil and gas, replacing it with greener methods of powering technologies to meet the demands of growing populations. In the US, green power plants are currently being implemented, including those that generate solar energy and produce natural gases that emits half of the CO2 that coal power plants would. This exemplifies how investment into alternative infrastructures is possible and beneficial towards a reduction in carbon emissions. Another method for reducing CO2 is limiting deforestation and implementing reforestation. Experts into researching this issue, including Richard Hoffman, estimate that though some appear sceptical, propagating trees would significantly impact global warming within a few decades. However, the reduction of deforestation is an immediate priority, as the Earth holds valuable ecosystems that simply cannot be replaced effectively through reforestation. Methane produced through booming agricultural industries is also a contributor to the Earth's warming surface, the only solution being a change in the manufacture and cultivation of animal products, switching to more sustainable methods of farming. Bhutan is one of the few countries that does not maintain any nuclear power plants and has no natural petroleum or natural gas reserves, instead buying supplies from neighbouring countries to support their limited infrastructure. As the least developed country, most rural houses are fueled by wood fires and farming methods are traditional and sustainable. However, as Bhutan begins to modernise, there has been an increasing demand for energy to supply an economically and socially growing population. In order to meet these demands, Bhutan, in partnership with India, has a 5-year plan to allow hydroelectricity to provide the main source of energy. However, through hydroelectricity is an alternative to burning carbon fuels, how the dams needed to produce this energy will negatively impact the environment is yet to be known. In terms of limiting deforestation to counteract increasing CO2, Bhutan has much of its forests protected by the World Heritage Committee and other organisations that aim to protect the areas of ecological importance. Bhutan's natural glaciers are also retreating, indicating a rise in seasonal temperatures indicative of a global warming. It is predicted that if temperatures increase as much as 1 Celsius glaciers on the eastern end of the Himalayas may decrease by 25%, with 56% of melting water disappearing. This is not only environmentally devastating, but will negatively impact ancient farming practices which rely on meltwater during the monsoon seasons. Such changes are largely out of Bhutan's control, as they are constrained as the least developed country in having any significant contribution towards reducing air pollution emitted from larger neighbouring countries. Such changes are largely out of Bhutan's control, as they are constrained as the least developed country in having any significant contribution towards reducing air pollution emitted from larger neighbouring countries such as India, and changes that are directly affecting their ecosystem and their way of life.
We realise that the task of combating climate change is a global issue. Bhutan has done much to limit its own carbon footprint on the Earth and calls upon other nation-states to increase their own efforts to tackle climate change. We applaud China's efforts in reducing carbon intensity by 28.5% between 2005 and 2013, which saw a reduction of 2.5 billion tonnes of CO2 emissions. In addition, China's massive increase of renewable energy sources such as hydro, wind and solar is a commendable effort. India has slowly come around to addressing the issue of climate change in their own country. With the launch of a National Action Plan on Climate Change, India intends a large reforestation plan and a very ambitious plan of installing 20 gigawatts of solar electricity by the year 2050. India has called upon developed nations to cut their own emissions drastically, insisting that they are the main cause of climate change. External Affairs Minister S.M. Krishna said at a roundtable meeting in New York, "We cannot get away from the fundamental fact that unsustainable lifestyles and patterns of production and consumption in the developed world have caused climate change. This cannot continue." Bhutan is in agreement with India that the onus is on developed nations of the world to increase their efforts in this cause. The United States has made inroads into combating the amount of CO2 emissions it creates since the Obama administration has been in office. It has increased solar energy generation tenfold, with a threefold increase in wind energy generation. We hope that these trends towards more clean and sustainable energy infrastructure will continue with the next administration to take power in office next year. The European Union has the unenviable task of enforcing its many member states to adhere to a strategy of the creation of more renewable energy sources and reducing its CO2 emissions. Some member states, such as Denmark, have made great strides in this regard, with the Danish government recently presenting a strategy to become completely independent from fossil fuels by 2050. We can only hope that the EU is able to make such valuable contributions as a whole. In conclusion, we feel that Bhutan is making significant impact locally, but we are unable to affect the global situation. We hope that our negative carbon emissions and our efforts at preserving forestation will act as an example to other least developed nations, and that larger, more industrialised nations will continue to expand their own efforts in the global struggle.